Welcome to the Inside Carolina podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley, joined by Buck Sanders and Jason Staples, and that means
Heyo.
it is the day after podcast. Recording this on Sunday morning as I smell bacon wafting through the house. My wonderful wife preparing breakfast for us. Buck Sanders, I'll come to you first. Not a whole lot to talk about in this one. I do have a few things to discuss later in the show, but Carolina walks into Durham and just kills Duke. I don't know how else to put it. Duke looked really, really bad, and Carolina looked really, really good, especially in that first half.
You know, what does it say about us that when North Carolina loses, we've got an hour and a half podcast of things to talk about, and when they win convincingly, we say, well, there's not a lot to talk about. So I suppose that not having a lot to talk about is a good thing as far as the season goes. You know, Jason talked about this. If people listen to the IC Live, which Inside Carolina sponsors on WCHL, you should be listening to it. It starts 3 hours ahead of the games. You know, I listened to that. I listened to Jason talking on that show, and he probably said this on a game plan as well, that the way for North Carolina to really prevail in this contest was to get up early. And that would kind of cut down the playbook for Duke. They wouldn't be able to do the things they like to do if they're trying to come from 21 down, 28 down. Then they've got to reconfigure. And so I think that was hugely important that North Carolina got off to a fast start. It's great to watch Sam Howell operate in the fourth quarter and do miraculous things, but it's even better to watch him, you know, have a 28-point first quarter and get such an insurmountable lead that it just opens everything up for UNC offensively and really cuts down on what the other team can do. So I think that's point number one. You know, point number two is, you know, getting a win over Duke. And I'm old enough to remember a lot of stuff, but both of y'all are old enough to remember when North Carolina was really struggling to beat Duke and NC State. I mean, since 2012, you know, before Mac Brown returned to North Carolina went 5-7 against Duke in those 5 of 7. Duke went 5 of 7 against UNC, and NC State went 4 of 7 against UNC in those 7 years prior to, from 2012 to when Mac returned in 2019. So it's really important to get those wins. I mean, we really can engage in moaning and groaning and being upset about losing to Florida State and Virginia because there were teams UNC should have beaten. But at the same time, would you take wins over Florida State and Virginia and losses to Duke and NC State? You know, that's just crazy talk there. So I think those are the two big takeaways. You know, it was good to see some of the young defensive players flash. Des Evans, you know, that kid's going to be a stud before he leaves UNC. And Miles Murphy, and they're just kind of scratching the surface there because KBJ has been hurt, and Clyde Pender also, I think, was slowed down by injuries and so on and so forth. And then they got Ritzy and Silver coming next year and Clyde Pender. I mean, things are going to change. So it's good to see some of those guys flash. But, you know, what else really can we talk about except, you know, great day for the Tar Heels. And when that UNC offense gets going, I don't know that there is a better offense in college football. Florida looked really good yesterday against a great defensive team, but when that UNC offense is clicking on all cylinders, they're just invincible. I mean, that's just how it goes. So that's my major takeaways, Tommy. So that's my 5 minutes of the program. We can finish this up in 10 more, and then go have brunch.
Jason, looking at the stat lines, clearly Carolina's offense was unbelievable. But I think the biggest stat line for me of the entire game is looking at Duke's defense. Chris Rumpf had 1 tackle for loss. Dumukagey had none. They came in with 15 sacks and 18 tackles for losses. Between them, Phil Longo's masterful game plan to prevent those guys from getting off. And then Carolina executed it. I thought that right there was the ball game, especially in the first 30 minutes.
And I want to ask Jason to follow up, including his answer there, because I'm not sure I fully understand it, and I'm not sure all of our listeners do. But how does the RPO game really help protect the quarterback and prevent the kind of carnage that Rumpf and his amigo have been executing on everybody else? I think the RPO game has a lot to do to it, but I think you can give me a more detailed explanation.
Yeah, so I'm going to take that second part first. I mean, and this was something we discussed in the pregame to this one of how do you slow down that rush? Well, if you can run the football and use a lot of the RPO stuff, you can find some ways to help there. The biggest thing, so first of all, running a bunch of RPOs is not going to protect your quarterback if you're not running the football well. If they don't have to respect the run, then you're just going to take a lot more shots on your quarterback. But if you've got a good running game, then what the RPO does is all you're doing is you're run blocking on the offensive line, and everybody on the offensive line and the running back and oftentimes an H-back, they're all blocking run, and the running back is running. He's going to get the ball. He feels like he's going to get the ball, and then the difference is that, well, he doesn't get the ball. The guys on the outside and the quarterback are at least potentially going past. What this does is it forces the defensive front to basically match up and use techniques that are designed to go against run blocking. So when you're a defensive end, for example, if you see that offensive tackle pass set and he's stepping back to protect, you're coming off the ball and you're getting into your pass rush moves, right? So you got a guy like Chris Rumpf who's got nice burst and all that. He sees that and he's coming off the ball the same way initially either way. But again, as soon as he feels the pressure of a guy coming into him in a run block where he's actually coming out to meet him, then he actually has to slow himself down a little bit to be able to make sure he doesn't overrun a play, that he doesn't get too far upfield or out of a gap trying to get to the quarterback. He's got to stop the run. And then it's not a run. Quarterback's pulling the ball and throwing, so everything up front is geared towards stopping that run. And that really slows that defensive front down a bunch because they have to be in their gaps. They have to honor that run even more than what you have to on play action, for example. And that's one of the things, you see teams do play action. One of the things that play action is going to do is you're going to see the defensive front have to slow down just a little bit because they have to honor the difference between that and a true pass set. So those defensive linemen are watching what the offensive linemen are doing. They're responding, not just watching it, but they're actually responding to it and by feel. And they're defending the run. Now, if they're good enough, if you've got a really, really good defensive tackle, say, who's able to get penetration against the run, sometimes that guy can cause problems for both at the same time at that point. So if he's getting into the backfield and is 2 yards deep into the backfield, shortly after the snap, even against the run blocking, then he could potentially blow up the run And as he's recognizing, oh, this guy doesn't have the ball, he just continues on his way to the quarterback, and causes problems. So it's not a panacea. It doesn't solve everything. But when you're able to run the football like that, and then able to it's the same look, you're not disguising anything. It's everybody's actually still run blocking. Then those guys are not in pass rush mode. They can't be focused on getting to the quarterback because it's a run play. So a lot of times what defenses have to do against that is you might have to bring a blitz. You might have to bring an extra guy whose job it is to focus on stopping the running quarterback, perhaps. They're trying to get to the quarterback with that guy, and maybe he's not responsible for this specific gap in this particular front. Maybe you take your free guy, the usual guy that you're going to be relying on to get to the ball carrier. That guy sometimes is just going to the quarterback, but then that can lead to really big plays in the running game. So most teams prefer not to do that. So basically it allows you to control the front with your running game in a way that you can't do any other way. And that's why it slows things down. And then on the outside, you're getting some easy throws, because the only times you're pulling the ball and you're not actually running it and you're not actually handing it off is when you have favorable matchups. And, like the 5 of the first 6 plays for Carolina were on those little RPO glance routes, where if Duke is going to put that extra pass defender in the box and have him step up against the run, then it's a one-on-one matchup. All you have to do as a quarterback is pull the ball and throw the slant. It's just, for a quarterback, it's no different than the 3-step passing game. It's no different than your quick game passing game. So all you do is show the ball, bam, and go. And a lot of times you don't even, you tell your quarterback on some of that quick game stuff, once you see this, just show it. You don't even have to really put it in there and ride it with the back. Just show it and get the ball out, because all that matters is that guy's coming up. And if you see him coming up, just go. So it can simplify a lot of things for the offense. And it's just really hard for the defense, because all of the keys that you're taught to go by on the defensive side are false. You can't be right. It's option football. And that's the hallmark of option football, is that, no matter what that guy does, he's the guy I'm optioning. No matter what decision he makes, I'm going to make him wrong. And you're just doing that down the field and some of that RPO stuff. So that's that. And Tommy, I can't even remember what your question was.
Well, I think I remember it, but I want to ask you this based off your answer there. What's the difference in the way Carolina does play action versus RPO? Because I don't see a ton of difference.
Oh, there's a pretty big difference in terms of what you're doing on the offensive line.
So that's what I want to hear about.
Yeah. So the difference is in an RPO situation, the offensive line is actually just there's no thought about the pass. They're blocking a run play. So it's a power, it's a counter, it's split zone, it's, standard inside zone. It's a number of different things, but they're run blocking, period. In a play action situation, you're punching. So you don't immediately pass set generally. So you step like it's a run, and then immediately from that, you are then shielding, and you're trying to prevent that guy from getting into the backfield. So it's not the same. It's a play action where the quarterback's action often looks very similar, but the quarterback doesn't have the option to give it. So it's going to look the same in terms of what's happening, but the quarterback doesn't have the option to give it. And the offensive line, instead of blocking run, first of all, you're not going to see any offensive lineman ever get downfield on a play action, because their job is to step to where they're going, make it look like run for just a split second, and then pass set. And there are a few different ways that you can do this on the offensive line. Some play action is straight pass set. Even though it's play action in the backfield, it's window dressing. That's more for the linebackers than it is for the defensive front. And so a lot of the longer yardage type play action passing situations, you're just going to see the offensive line, they're actually pass setting on play action. Now, you can cause some problems for the defensive front by running a draw there where you pass set and then run block. So, there's different counters that you have even with that. But on a lot of play action. And you can tell the difference between play action and RPOs just by what the defense or by what the offensive line's doing. Are they moving forward? Are the guards, for example, pushing out to the line of scrimmage and then, trying to get upfield to the backer? Or are you seeing guys, are their heads or their helmets coming up? And that's the traditional way that you have your linebackers and safeties read, run, or pass. Where's the helmet? Is the helmet down and going forward, or is the guy standing up and the helmet coming up? As soon as you see that helmet come up, you're pass covering. As soon as you see that helmet go down, that's a run. What the RPO does is it plays around with that and it says, okay, your key is that helmet's coming down, he's coming to your level, you better meet it. But the problem is it turns out it's not a run because the guy pulled it. So that's the difference between the RPO and the play action. Is one, you're actually pass blocking, though initially a lot of times there might be a step from a guy or two that's going to try to make it look disguised, but you're actually pass setting. You're trying to prevent those guys from getting upfield, getting to the quarterback. The other one, you are just straight run blocking. From the receivers, quarterbacks side of things, it's negligible difference.
Go ahead, Buck. You're muted.
One of the questions that I have is, has the sort of the widespread acceptance and teaching of zone blocking even at the high school level, has that made the RPO game a little easier? Because back in the day, it was usually man blocking. You put a hat on the hat, a guy in front of you. And then I can't remember the guy's name, some guy in Denver. He was the offensive line coach out there back in when they had, all those great running backs. Some running back from there would get the MVP almost every year. I can't remember the guy's name, but
I think you're talking about Alex Gibbs.
That's him. And he sort of brought zone blocking into the modern era. And, now that's filtered down to, I watch a lot of high school coaching tips. There's several high school coaches out there I follow on Twitter and elsewhere, YouTube. And they're teaching guys to zone block as, in the high school now. And with zone blocking, which would be blocking for the run, that's gotten so widespread does that make the RPO game, does the RPO game sort of feed off of that, I guess is where I'm going there. More so than man blocking.
It's tricky. So I would say no. The main reason for that is that now most teams are running RPOs off of every type of blocking scheme you can imagine. So first of all, it's a little tricky too, because zone blocking, generally speaking, I mean, one of the rules of zone blocking is if you've got a guy in front of you, you block him. It's man blocking at that point. Everybody's going to step to the gap that they're responsible for. But if you got 4 defensive linemen over 5 offensive linemen, those 5 offensive linemen who have a defensive lineman over them are blocking those 4 defensive linemen. It doesn't really look all that different in that regard. But the big thing is, I mean, a lot of what Carolina does in the RPO game, they're RPOing off of gap blocking principles. So they're RPOing off of a counter or off of a power where you've got a guy pulling. You've got all sorts of different things that are happening there, and you're just RPOing off of that. And all that matters is that there's a conflict defender, and it could be a pre-snap RPO where if that guy's lined up closer to the box, throw the bubble or throw the little spot screen. Any number of things you can do with that. Or if that guy is coming forward at the snap, this is a post-snap RPO. If that guy's coming forward at the snap, throw the glance right behind him. And you can do that off of power. You can do that off of wide zone. You can do that off of tight zone or inside zone. You can do that off of counter. You can do that. You can do it off of some quarterback action. I mean, there's any number of things that you can do. And the beauty of the RPO is that you can basically divorce the actual run concept from the pass concept. So, I mean, you get certain offenses, for example, where, and this is a very modern way to do this in terms of how you call it. And this is one of the things that gets tricky. As soon as you add this kind of element to your offense, the question is, how do you call it in terms of the language to make it easy for your players to be able to remember and execute? So what a lot of teams have done is they'll call, let's say 39, and 39 might be, let's say, outside zone G, where you've got a puller. So you got 39 is your standard run call. But now what you do is you say, okay, we're going to go 39, but then we're going to have like the names of fast food restaurants are going to be our tags. So we're going to go 39 McDonald's. And McDonald's means we're going to run the glance route on the outside. And now it's 39, but it's an RPO. And so, or you know, now you're going to go 39 Wendy's. And now you're going to have the outside, you're going to have the same outside zone G. You're running the same run play, only now you've got the spot screen on the backside with that. And that's all it means. You know, 39 Burger King. And you've got, you know, outside guy running deep, inside guy running a little quick out, and bam. And so, you know, people do this with, you know, you might do it with beverage names, with, you know, any number of things. And you add those as tags into your offense. And all you're doing is you're tagging with, say, a quick game concept along with the run game concept. So now you haven't even added anything to your offense. All that's happened is you're just adding the tag to the play call. And you can do that with any run concept can be done with. You can do this with. Now, there are a limited number of pass concepts that you can use because you have to get the ball out quickly enough and all of that in terms of the offensive line not being too far downfield. But you can basically just tag any run concept and say, okay, we're going to go speed option right Sonic. Speed option right Sonic, and speed option right Sonic means we're running speed option. Everything up front is speed option. And we just have an additional backside post.
You know, Jason,
quick post.
Really should be getting paid for these mentions.
I was thinking about that. Maybe I need to start eating those on air and getting my pay from getting some sponsorship for that stuff. But I mean, I think that's basically it. It's not a matter of getting simplified by the blocking schemes or anything, by the popularity of zone stuff or anything else. Especially since these days, you look at like Lincoln Riley or what they're doing in Chapel Hill or what they're doing in Tallahassee. Those teams, they're running a ton of gap blocking. I mean, North Carolina, it runs more gap blocking than they do zone blocking this year. And so, but the thing is, they're just like Lincoln Riley. They are using a lot of RPO concepts off of those gap blocking plays. And it's just so hard on the defense. What I do think has made it a lot easier is all of the 7-on-7. So you look at quarterbacks are coming in more prepared to be able to make some of these quick decisions because of throwing and catching so much in the 7-on-7 game.
So somebody asked me yesterday, how does the running back and quarterback know who's keeping or pulling? How does that work between those two?
Yeah, so you rep that a ton, first of all. But the rule is that the running back, when he's coming through the line of scrimmage, he's going to go just like a normal handoff where he's got, you know, the inside arm is up, and the quarterback is going to put the ball in the pocket. So that's the thing. And then the quarterback is responsible to ride the mesh point with his feet moving with the running back until he makes that decision. And the running back, his job is to stay soft. He can't close his hands on the ball until the quarterback pulls his hands. So basically, the ball's in there, and then the quarterback either leaves it or he takes it. And the running back has to be on the ball so that it doesn't come out once the quarterback lets go. but he has to be soft on the ball so that the quarterback can still pull it. And it's just a matter of repping that enough so that each guy has a feel for what that's going to feel like. And that's something where sometimes one quarterback might have a slightly different touch than another quarterback in that regard. And that's sometimes where you'll see, say, a backup comes in and you'll see a fumble on an exchange like that on a mesh point, because they're not used to meshing together as much as the guys that rep together all the time. So sometimes that's an issue. Most coaches now have all their quarterbacks, or let's say their top 2 quarterbacks, rep with their top 3 running backs enough that that's not going to be an issue all the time. But it is something you have to rep a bunch. And as long as the running back doesn't clamp too early, because that's really where you're going to get most of the problems, is one of 2 things. Either the quarterback's not going to put it far enough in the pocket, so the quarterback just kind of puts it on the side and the running back never has it, which that could happen in a regular handoff, or the running back clamps down too early and the quarterback goes to pull, and then, you have kind of a fight over the ball. But basically, as long as the running back doesn't clamp down too early, it's actually pretty easy. I mean, you could practice this at home with your kid or with your very, very tolerant spouse of, let's, see if we can, exchange this ball and you run this way.
Mine's
And
not that tolerant.
Yeah, exactly. But you put that in, let's see how we could do this. And you can see that it works pretty well. And it's the same exchange principles that you have on something like a zone read or any sort of option concept. I mean, triple option, going back to the 60s, 50s, where you have the dive back coming, you got the quarterback turns, pivots, puts the ball in the belly of the dive back, and then is reading.
Same principle.
It's exactly the same principle. You rep it exactly the same way. That guy's got the ball or the quarterback pulls it, and you just stay soft until the quarterback pulls his hands. So it's pretty straightforward. You can get good at this just by repping it and making sure that guys do what they're told to do, and don't clamp down too early, and make sure you put it all the way in there before whether you're pulling it or not. There you go.
The story writes itself. I'm going to take a second and talk about Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Certainly sponsors of Inside Carolina and great friends of Inside Carolina premium subscribers. You get 10% off your order, and let me tell you, they have so many sales going on around the holidays. You can really get some good deals on anything you need, clothes-related, sweatshirts, outdoor gear, indoor gear, man cave gear, however you want to do it, Johnny T-Shirt. And look, they're just such nice folks. They're alumni-owned and operated, local business, small business. We need to support them as much as possible. If you're buying Carolina gear over the holidays, buy it from Johnny T-Shirt, either in the store or online. Do them a favor, do us a favor. They're awesome. If you're listening to the Inside Carolina live shows on Saturday mornings or whenever they are, you have opportunities to win gift cards and even the jerseys they give away. So a great deal for all of us at Inside Carolina, a great deal for you if you're a listener. Support Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Take another short break. Let the national guys pay the bills. We'll be back with the Day After podcast. Carolina beats Duke. And today we're getting an education from Jason Staples. More to come after the break. All right, folks, you're back with the Day After podcast. Carolina blows out Duke in Durham. Like I said earlier, and Buck said as well, we talk for hours when Carolina loses. We talk for short period times when Carolina does their job. And Buck, I'm listening to Jason talk about all these concepts that the offense does. Let's talk about the Carolina defense a little bit. I thought there were some leaks on defense. It's tough to find leaks when you win by 32 points. But, Buck, your thought on how the defense played. Chaz Surratt certainly had a big game. I'm not so – I used to think Chase Bryce was a good quarterback. Good Lord. He did not look good against Carolina, Buck. But I think the defense is where Carolina has to lean or get some more production, especially in the next 3 weeks or the next month. Your thoughts on what they look like against Duke?
Well, of course, with like every defense in college football right now, there are missed assignments. There are some poor tackling. There's a lot of things going on with defenses nationwide. Florida put 40 on Georgia, which is probably the best, most talented defense in the nation. And, it's getting more and more difficult. The good news yesterday was that North Carolina did not have to face a quarterback that can use his legs to beat you. Even if they're facing a quarterback that isn't that great of a passer, if that guy can run the ball, he's causing North Carolina defense problems. I mean, that's just the way it's been. We saw it against Florida, saw it against Virginia. Thankfully, we were not going to see it next week against Wake Forest because Hartman's not that guy either that runs the ball the way, for example, the Florida State or Virginia quarterback did. And, I'm wondering why this particular year that defenses look so lousy. I mean, this is across the board issue. You see it in the Big Ten, you see it in the SEC, you see it in the ACC. NC State put on Miami, who's supposed
41.
They're supposed to have a good defense. And they
Georgia gave up 44 yesterday.
Yeah, there you go. I mean,
Michigan, Don Brown is a really good coordinator.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the probably top 5 coordinators in the country, and Michigan gave up 31 to Indiana.
I don't know what to attribute this to.
COVID. It is absolutely the difference in terms of preparation. No spring.
That's what I've heard people say, that, for defenses is so much about getting the fundamentals right, getting the technique right, that if you don't have time to rep and practice that stuff, it's going to show up. Now, does UNC's defense have issues that are unique to it? Sure. There are, some deficiencies in personnel. The defensive secondary that started the Syracuse game, none of them played yesterday. All 4, both corners and both safeties that started Syracuse, are on the sidelines. So, injury is an issue. I think some there. I think they played pretty well, notwithstanding the fact that they were playing with guys that did not begin the year as starters. But I don't think that all of North Carolina's defensive issues are due to personnel or due to injury. I think there's a systemic problem, as Jason says, relating back to the lack of opportunity to practice fundamentals and techniques in the spring
and tackling. I mean, think about this. Even once you start practicing in the fall, think about how teams have limited contact.
Yes.
And limited, and not just full contact in terms of tackling to the ground and all that, but like making sure that guys are more distanced in practice and these sorts of things. I mean, you're trying to minimize how much close contact guys are having in practice. You're practicing much more like it's a 7-on-7 situation in a lot of these places. So you're not getting the same level of physicality that you're able to develop in camp and all of that. I mean, especially in those first weeks of camp, you just weren't able to get the usual grind in that's really going to help that defense early on. And that's why defenses, almost every season, defenses start ahead of the offense. This season, it's been the opposite because the defense never really got worked into things to be able to do things in the, focusing on the physicality and taking guys to the ground.
And I've heard you say this before, and just looking at what happened on Saturday, in college football, I think it kind of proves your point that you can't really catch up during the season, when you've missed that amount of preparation. You're not going to make up for the preparation that you lost in the preseason during an ordinary practice week when you're getting ready to play. Like next week, they're going to play Wake Forest. During that week, they're going to probably be working on things related to what Wake Forest does. And so you're not going to get this same amount, in the spring and for some part of fall practice or fall camp. They're not thinking about any specific team. They're working on fundamentals, techniques, tackling, those kinds of things. So is the defense going to miraculously get better the rest of this year? My guess is not. I think it helps to see some of these younger players like Des Evans and Miles Murphy flash a little bit. That's helpful. But, the defense, in the way overworked cliche of the year, it is what it is at this point. It's not going to get radically better. Now, maybe they can make strides before a bowl game. If there's a month between when the last game is played and when the bowl game starts, then they could probably get some work in on fundamentals and do some of the things that they weren't able to do in the spring and in fall camp. But other than that, I just don't see not a huge step forward for North Carolina's defense over the rest of the regular season.
Yeah, I don't disagree there. Maybe get healthy in the secondaries a little bit would help North Carolina. Jason, looking towards Carolina's defense, I mentioned Tshirt. I thought he had a good game. I thought Cam Kelly tackled. If Cam Kelly tackles like that, like he did yesterday against Virginia and even Florida State, Carolina, those games might have been different. Talk about Patrice Renee. I thought he looked pretty good, and I thought they put him in some positions that were a little different. But specifically those guys, Jason, but also the importance of getting those younger guys some reps. I'll say right now, I said it on Twitter, they should have gotten more reps.
They should have been in there. In my view, the younger guys should have been in there about mid-third quarter, kind of at the latest. They should have started working some of the younger guys in even earlier.
On both sides of the ball, too.
Yeah, well, especially on the defensive side, you want to get those guys in earlier than later. And they did with some of those guys. I think on the defensive side, they were working some of the young guys into the lineup. They didn't go to a fully young lineup until later, and I can understand that. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, there were some really encouraging things there. I think Renee has continued to improve and work his way back into form over the course of the season. You could see early in the season. I mean, that first game, it kind of hurt me to watch him run because he just did not look comfortable running. He looked like he was running in quicksand and looked like a guy that wasn't comfortable on his knee. And with some of the stuff that we saw from him against Duke, you're looking at a guy that is starting to look like an NFL corner again. And they used that corner blitz off the short side quite a bit against Duke. And you could see Duke was going to try to use some of the running quarterback concepts that had hurt Carolina a little bit coming into this game. That they were going to try to do some of that with Chase Bryce, even though he's not much of a runner. And Bateman guessed right on a couple of those and basically said, we're going to bring our corner into that look. We think you might be running your quarterback. And sure enough, they were. And he had a couple opportunities for tackles for loss as a result and finished the job. So that's good. And you could see him, jumping on some underneath routes, almost had a pick on one of them. So really, really encouraging to see. But the other thing is, like you mentioned, all the young guys. And, I went back this morning and I went back and I watched the last quarter and a half closely, just, rewinding, looking back, looking at players, because this is really the first opportunity we've had to see some of these players in this extended of a competition on game day without it being against a really bad team. I mean, this is Duke is not a bad football team. This is an opportunity to see them against an ACC offense. And in some cases before Duke had completely gone to backups as well. So that's really helpful. And some guys showed that they really have a chance to be really good players before they leave Chapel Hill. You can see that you can see why some of these guys are not playing as much. earlier in games. You can still see some of that, but the talent, the physical talent is there. I think Des Evans continues to show that he's continuing to earn more and more time. You're going to see him getting in more and more as the season goes on. And he played a lot in the first half too. But he's a guy that really fits a lot of what Bateman wants to do on defense, and just his length. I mean, you look at the sack that he had, that's just a length sack. That's just an offensive lineman not being able to get to his pads and him being able to compress the pocket a little bit. And, quarterback gets flushed to him and he finishes the job. And that's just straight up being really, really long. And you could see that on a number of occasions. He's still going to have to work on bend a little bit, but the physical talent is really there. And some counter moves and some hand, he's really, really immature and young with his hand usage at this point. He just doesn't, nothing is really natural. You can see he's kind of thinking about where he's got to put his hands instead of just naturally reacting and responding. But again, all of that stuff, you give him a year and that guy's he's going to start really flashing next year, I think. And so that's good. I thought Pinder showed really good burst on the inside. Now, again, his hand placement is a mess. There were a number of plays where you could see the offensive lineman's got both hands on the plates of his chest because he didn't handle the hand placement and wasn't able to win the hand fighting enough to be able to keep himself from getting blocked. But even when he was getting blocked like that, a lot of times his explosiveness was good enough to at least maintain his gap and get some penetration. He just wasn't going to be making any play that way. And I thought Miles Murphy continued. I mean, he played a good bit early, and I thought he was a guy that really looked. Again, he looks the part, and he looks like he's going to be a player. And another guy that played a lot in this game and played early was Kevin Hester. And Hester again showed that one of the things that, again, with Hester, he's 6'4", and you can see some of that length with him where you're seeing the biggest difference with some of these older guys or with some of these younger guys is instead of being, say, 5'11", 6 foot, 270, 280, or in some cases 5'11", 300, you're looking at 6'4", 6'5", and the arm length and the ability to just the bigger bodies. Those guys close down gaps just because their length. And so that's a really encouraging thing to see in terms of what the future looks like. Now, that said, once those guys all got on the field together, Duke scored without too much trouble. So it does tell you something about why don't you just play the young guys? Because, obviously the older guys aren't getting it done. Well, the older guys shut that Duke offense down. The younger guys, you can see the flashes and you can see, oh man, he's going to be so much better than the older guy, but he's not yet because of that play. I mean, there's a play coming off the goal line. I think it was early fourth quarter where Des Evans just got nosy and he got out of his gap and led a guy around the left edge, and he didn't play for a few snaps after that because it's just you've got to do your job. You've got to be in exactly the right spot, and just little things like that are getting cleaned up, but the physical talent is there. And I think there's a lot to be encouraged by there. I would have really liked to see more of some of the young offensive linemen early, much earlier. You saw a little bit of them, say second half of the fourth quarter. And, to me, some of those offensive linemen, and we don't know what happened with Brian Anderson yet, but some of those offensive linemen, the starters are really valuable. And I think you've got to give some of those young guys a little bit more time, but I tend to default to playing more guys in general. So,
yeah, Brian Anderson potential injury could be a significant problem for North Carolina. And like I said, and I'll say it again, he shouldn't have been on the field at the time. I understand the reasoning, but I don't understand why. That's my nitpick for the game. Otherwise, I thought the game went very well for Matt Brown and staff. But to close the show, let's look around maybe the ACC a little bit. I'm not going to mention Florida State, Jason. I promise I won't mention how – good God. I mean, but Notre Dame, Clemson.
You just your promise.
I didn't really. That team down there is struggling, but Notre Dame, Clemson. Carolina fans should have been huge Clemson fans last night because I don't see Notre Dame or Clemson losing again before the ACC championship game. But what'd you think just on a national scale, including Clemson, Notre Dame, college football world yesterday?
Well, I think that maybe Jim Harbaugh might be polishing up his resume a little bit. I think one team that nobody's really talking about that much is BYU. They just body slammed Boise State, and it wasn't. I mean, it was sort of like the Duke UNC game. The Clemson Notre Dame outcome, I have to be honest, it surprised me. Now I know that the elf was out, but DJ, last name unpronounceable, was pretty good. I mean, he threw for 439 yards and 2 touchdowns. ETN had a tough game. I think Notre Dame's run defense is really, really good. But it really surprised me, that outcome of that game. I honestly,
you got to remember how many guys Clemson had out on defense too. I mean, 3 of their 4 best defensive players are out.
Yeah, but still, I just did not see Notre Dame putting 33 on Clemson in regulation, and then to finish the game with 47. I just did not see that coming. Ohio State, to be honest, really wasn't that impressive, against Rutgers. And, people are starting to second guess the Ohio State University. And the Florida-Georgia game is just ridiculous. I mean, that's another game that wasn't close. And it was another instance of – now, Georgia, and Jason will probably back this up, but they got 5-star talent all over that defense. I mean, all over it. And Florida put 44 points on them. I mean, threw for 474 yards, 4 touchdown passes. I mean, it's either an illustration of the impact of the pandemic on preparation in college football, or it's a sign that, in this day and age, good offense beats good defense pretty consistently. And
that's
it may be that could be both, those are kind of the games that jumped out to me. I don't know if there's another one that I'd talk about. Texas squeaks out a close one over West Virginia. Who cares? Liberty, it's not a shock to me that they beat Virginia Tech. I mean,
how they did, though, was
it was pretty dramatic. Yeah,
pretty glorious.
Yeah, it was pretty glorious. Hey, let's score a touchdown, but call a timeout right before doing that. Doesn't seem like a good. We fault North Carolina's coaches sometimes for their clock management and game decisions. How would you like to be Justin Fuente today?
You're going to ice a kicker on a 60-yard field goal where he hadn't kicked anything remotely that long ever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So by the way, let's think about this. Let's go back to that Georgia game and just Georgia in general. What continues to amaze me about Georgia is how Kirby Smart, and you got to wonder, like, is this like just a flat out stubbornness thing where he wants to, it's his aim to prove that you can actually win in modern football without a quarterback?
I think that's it. Even though his mentor, Nick Saban, gave up on that philosophy about, 3 years ago now or so? 4?
Oh, no, that was longer than that. I mean, Nick was already,
but
But to prove, like, you know what? I think we can win without a quarterback, and let's just prove to the nation that it's more fun doing it that way. And you realize Georgia could have Justin Fields.
Yeah.
And they chose – they had Justin Fields on campus, and they chose to treat him as a runner who couldn't throw. And they would bring him on the field, for 2 or 3 plays a game to run some sort of spread option with him and then trot a guy out there who is not as good as him. And then this year,
You're not going to beat Florida if your quarterback goes 5 of 16 for 78 yards.
And you're
just Stetson, not doing it, you know.
Stetson, I don't want to say, be too hard on a guy, but they've got 2 5-star guys behind him.
Yeah.
They could be putting JT Daniels out there.
Yeah. But is he fully healthy? Is he cleared to play?
He's ready to go?
Yeah.
To me at this point, it's almost like performance art that he's trying to prove a point about what you can do with or without a quarterback. And that program is as good as you can be without a quarterback. And to me, the amazing thing is that they had 1B in terms of best quarterbacks in the country on their roster and were ready to roll.
At the start of the season with Newman and Daniels.
No, I'm talking about a year ago when they just basically
said,
we're not really interested in modernizing and letting Justin Fields just throw it all over the place. So why don't you go somewhere else?
They hired an offensive coordinator that was supposed to be to use an antique term, the bee's knees. Montken, I guess, Todd Montken. He was just supposed to be just like this offensive genius that was going to bring Georgia into the 1970s, at least offensively. And what are they doing?
But the thing is, you can't modernize until you have a quarterback.
Yep.
Just ask Larry Fedora.
Well, they have some though. That's the problem. They just not playing them.
Right, and that's the part that is baffling to me. Like, you have Justin Fields, and then you choose, you know what? Well, we can try to win without him.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's crazy, but okay. So now you have other guys, and you know what? We think we can roll out Stetson Bennett out there against Alabama and Florida, and we think we're in good shape. We just got to make sure we can manage the game enough to let our defense win it.
Well, because defense wins championships.
Never has.
Yeah. So.
Even when it was a more defensive game, you still had to have complete teams, and that whole defense wins championships thing has always been wrong. Certainly hasn't been right since the 80s.
No more 7-6 wins like Bama beat LSU that time or whatever. It's fascinating to watch how important quarterbacks are. Even though, Jason, you mentioned it, and we need to get out of here and wrap the show. I told you 2 weeks ago that I thought Skalski's absence on Clemson's defense was more important than Trevor Lawrence's.
I still think with Lawrence, they beat Notre Dame by 17.
We'll find out.
And with Skalski out, everything else being the same, because as many yards as they threw for, as many yards as the young guy threw for, and he's a really good player. They left some plays out there that led to no scores that were not going to get missed by the Elf. And so, there's still a pretty big gap, and that guy's going to be really good though, but there's still a pretty big gap. I'm surprised though we're getting out of here, Tommy, without talking about your what had to be your favorite part of this last game.
The backup quarterback.
I saw Jacoby Criswell and Jace Ruder on the field there. I figured that we'd talk about that at least half this episode. So what'd you see from the young guys?
I didn't
they
see.
They just handed the ball off.
I saw. You know what? And Jason, your opinion, seriously, I thought Criswell has potential. He looked a little nervous out there when he has a hard time getting his feet. That's understandable. I wanted to see him throw the ball down the field.
Yeah.
Rationale.
I'll tell you who did look good coming in late is the running back.
Mm-hmm.
British Brooks. Oh, DJ Jones.
But Jones did definitely.
He's got some explosion to his game, and that's going to be the thing we talk about all off season is how they're going to replace Javonte and Michael Carter. Even though some people will hold out hope for Javonte.
No,
he could be a day one guy. Possibly very few running backs go day one, but high second round at least, I would think.
Which is day two these days, but yeah.
He's got. I think
I've got a second round grade on him.
Yeah,
if he tries to stay in Chapel Hill, somebody needs to drive him to the NFL draft. I mean, that kid is fantastic.
Yeah, I would advise him right now. You need to start getting your people considering, who your representation needs to be, because you need to leave.
And as smart as he is, I'm guessing he's going to get his degree by December, if he doesn't already have it.
And even if he didn't, he would have no problem getting it, in 3 or 4 years. It doesn't matter.
A lot of things are done online now anyway, so
Well, he was great, and we didn't talk about him. I mean, he's ridiculous, and I think with ETN having a rough day against Notre Dame, I think if Williams can show out against Notre Dame, whether or not Carolina wins or loses, I think that
Yeah,
I've always
a lot of people
thought ETN
criticize PFF rankings, but evaluations, but Javonte is just ridiculous in terms of making people miss.
I don't know if he makes you miss. He just runs over you.
Well, he's gonna find a way to get through a tackle.
Yeah.
Whether it's making, and the thing is, he does both.
Yeah.
And I got a few people who criticized me in the summer for my scouting reports when I had Williams as the top guy on the offense. It was like, wait, you're gonna have him over Howell? Yeah.
You see why?
He's not even the starting running back. I don't care. That guy is an absolute stud, and he's gonna be. NFL teams are gonna love him after this year. Well,
he could be a 3-down guy, at the next level. He could catch the ball,
He's one of the few guys that NFL teams could look at and be like, this guy could actually be a feature. Yeah. He can be a load carrier, and that those guys are something else at the next level. So
yeah, he's fun to watch. Don joined us on Inside Carolina Live, and he said you might remember the name Caleb Hood for a replacement for Javonte. So that'll be interesting to watch. But yeah, he is.
That'll be a big deal.
And I've always said Michael Carter is my guy for the Carolina offense. But wow, Javonte's different, as they say.
Good problem to have when you have both of them.
Absolutely. That'll do it. We talked about the backup quarterback, both of them briefly. We've covered everything, and we also got education from Jason Staples on the concepts on the offense, RPOs and play actions and blocking and all. Buck Sanders, Jason Staples. This has been the day after podcast. Carolina routs Duke, and we all get educated. Thanks, boys.
Later,
Bye
guys.
from Johnny T-shirt.
Bye from the Johnny T-shirt, and rate us and review us on iTunes and YouTube and all that stuff. Appreciate it, folks.
Thanks, guys.